Nathaniel Grant quietly settled into his first-class seat, exuding an air of dignified calm that belied the storm quietly brewing beneath his composed exterior. Dressed in a crisp white shirt tucked into charcoal gray slacks and a tailored light jacket, he carried only a modest garment bag. Embossed on the side in bold letters were the words, Police Chief, Chicago Metro. Despite the emblem that could have easily commanded attention, Nathaniel had never been one to seek the spotlight. His honor and integrity shone not through fanfare, but in every measured step he took, every deliberate breath, every word carefully chosen. In a world that too often judged by appearance first and substance last, few could have predicted how quickly calm would dissolve into chaos on this otherwise routine flight. The late afternoon sun spilled through the aircraft's panoramic windows, casting long golden streaks of light across the plush carpet and sleek seats. Passengers murmured softly, settling in, some clicking seatbelts, others tucking away briefcases and headphones. Nathaniel adjusted his jacket and leaned back slightly, ready to enjoy a moment of peace. And then came the voice. It sliced through the ambient hum like a sudden gust of cold air. Brooke, the lead flight attendant, known for her pristine uniform and unwavering adherence to protocol, paused abruptly at Nathaniel's row. She stood with rigid posture, her red lipstick accentuating the severity of her gaze. "Are you sure you belong here?" she asked, her tone clipped, distant. Her voice echoed in the narrow cabin, sending ripples of discomfort across the nearby rows. A few passengers turned, subtly, curiously. The question wasn't just inquisitive. It was accusatory. Nathaniel looked up slowly, meeting her stare. "Yes," he replied evenly, his voice calm but carrying a quiet intensity that seemed to pull the air from the space between them. "This is Seat 1C. He extended his boarding pass, unfolded, uncreased, perfectly valid. Brooke took the pass but didn't glance at it right away. Her eyes flicked to his face, then to the bag resting beside him, lingering on the embossed words. Still, she scrutinized the ticket like it might somehow unravel under her glare. "Are you traveling on duty? Or accompanying someone?" she asked, her voice layered with suspicion. Nathaniel offered a measured nod. "I'm traveling for business," he said. "Alone?" She said nothing more, only turned sharply and walked toward the galley. Her shoes clicked with cold determination. Nathaniel eased back into his seat, the murmurs behind him growing louder now, some filled with pity, others with barely veiled contempt. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. He'd felt that gaze before. He reached for his phone and opened a message from his wife, Camille. It read simply, "Call me when you land. So proud of you. I love you." Her words brought a quiet smile to his face. Camille was a constant source of warmth in a world that had too often turned its back on him. But that warmth was fleeting. The cold glances across the aisle, the whispers just low enough to avoid confrontation, all reminded him of what he had endured time and again, not in war zones or on city streets, but in polished spaces like this, where dignity was so often denied in silence. What Brooke didn't know was that she hadn't just embarrassed a man. She'd ignited a storm. From a few rows back, a young man named Darius leaned toward his sister and whispered, "Why'd she talk to him like that?" He showed her the ticket. His sister nodded solemnly. Because to her, someone like him doesn't belong in first class. Nathaniel took a slow breath. The water offered to him by Brooke minutes later was served without eye contact. Without a smile, just a cold transaction meant to check a box, not offer comfort. In the galley, another flight attendant named Liana had been observing quietly. She was still relatively new but deeply perceptive. She had seen the interaction from the moment Brooke approached Nathaniel. And while she wasn't in charge, something about what she had witnessed didn't sit right. She passed by Nathaniel's seat gently on her next round and gave a subtle, understanding nod. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. Nathaniel's thoughts drifted to other lobbies where he'd been stopped, hotels where he'd been asked if he was making a delivery, boardrooms where his authority was questioned until his badge or his title was mentioned. A lifetime of these moments, each one a drop in a bucket of quiet indignities that had never been emptied. And yet here, trapped in a sealed cabin 35,000 feet in the air, there was no door to exit, no quiet corridor to retreat to. Here, he was fully exposed. Judged. Misjudged. Camille's second message came a few minutes later. What exactly happened? 3 words, but they carried weight. She knew his silence as well. Knew that when he didn't speak about something, it was likely burning in his chest. In the cockpit, a subtle alert flashed on Captain Hayes' console. A directive marked Executive Override. The captain blinked in recognition. Only one person had that authority. A few minutes later, Marcus Wynn, the head of flight services, appeared on screen in the cockpit for a live video call. His voice was professional, measured, but carried undeniable gravity. "There's been an incident reported by a first-class passenger," he began. "That passenger is Chief Nathaniel Grant, police chief of Chicago Metro." He paused. "And the husband of our CEO, Camille Grant." Brooke, now summoned to the cockpit, froze in place as Captain Hayes turned to her, expression unreadable. "You're to return to seat 1C and deliver a formal apology," he said. Effective immediately. Passengers noticed the shift. Whispered guesses. Subtle glances. Brooke's face paled. Her hands trembled. But she obeyed. She returned to Nathaniel's seat, standing stiffly beside him. The air around her felt heavier now. "Mr. Grant," she began, her voice low, tight with restraint, "I apologize for my earlier conduct. I made an assumption based on limited information and was wrong to do so. I regret the embarrassment it caused." The silence that followed was loud. Nathaniel met her eyes. "I've endured many forms of bias in my life. But being publicly humiliated in a seat I paid for, on an airline run by my wife, is something I didn't anticipate." The words were soft, but devastating. A woman nearby lowered her book. A man across the aisle nodded solemnly. Others simply watched. Brooke stepped back and disappeared down the aisle. Camille, meanwhile, stood in her office at the airline's headquarters, her expression firm as she dialed directly into operations. "I want her name," she said. "And I want the captain to know he's done the right thing. Security will meet the plane when it lands." She wasn't done. She drafted a message to her assistant, effective immediately, "Initiate a review of all discrimination complaints over the past 18 months. We are rewriting the rules." Back on board, Liana gently set a fresh glass of sparkling water on Nathaniel's tray. "Sir," she said softly, "this one's on the house." She said nothing else, just gave a slight bow and moved on. Respect didn't need noise. As the plane neared descent, a hush fell over the cabin. Captain Hayes' voice came over the intercom. "We will be met by security at the gate. All passengers are asked to remain seated until first class has deplaned." Everyone knew what that meant. When the aircraft touched down in Chicago, a sleek black SUV waited on the tarmac. Next to it stood Camille Grant. Composed, poised, resolute. She boarded the plane calmly and walked the narrow aisle with the gravitas of someone who knew precisely what was about to happen. When she reached her husband's seat, she gave him a nod, then turned to face the cabin. "My name is Camille Grant. I am the CEO of this airline," she began. And the cabin fell silent. "A few hours ago, a man, my husband, was questioned about whether he belonged in this seat. Not because there was a problem with his ticket, but because someone assumed that he didn't fit their idea of what a first-class passenger should look like." She let that hang in the air. "That is unacceptable." Turning toward Brooke, whose face had lost all color, Camille said, "You didn't just fail a passenger. You failed our values. You'll be escorted off this plane and placed on immediate leave pending review." Security stepped forward. Brooke offered no resistance. Camille then turned to Liana. "You showed integrity. I'll see you at headquarters. We're rebuilding what this program stands for." And then, with quiet dignity, Camille offered her hand to her husband. Nathaniel stood, nodded at the captain, and walked off the aircraft with the quiet pride of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. In the car, as they pulled away from the tarmac, Camille tapped her tablet. "I'm calling for a board meeting tomorrow," she said. "Policy revisions. Mandatory training. Internal review boards with passenger representation. And anonymous reporting lines." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "All that because of today?" She met his gaze. "No. All this because today was finally witnessed." Later that night, from their high-rise apartment overlooking the glittering skyline of Chicago, they sat in silence. The television played a muted news segment. Airline CEO enforces new anti-discrimination protocols after incident with police chief husband. Nathaniel set down his glass. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" Camille shook her head. "Maybe not. But she'll never forget how it felt when she was walked off that plane." And with that, they sat together in the quiet, knowing that a battle had ended, but a movement had begun. A movement born not from noise, but from unshakable resolve. A silent man had finally been heard, and no one would ever again ask him if he belonged.